6 p.m. on a Tuesday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's begin with the headlines. Software mogul turned maverick politician An Cheol-soo officially launches his People's Party. The inauguration ceremony kicked off this afternoon. The Russian ambassador to Seoul expresses doubts about the effectiveness of holding five-party talks and a THAAD deployment, saying isolating the regime is not the key to solving the North Korean nuclear issue. The real contenders in the two-way race for the U.S. presidency are starting to break away from the pack. Results for the Iowa caucuses show Ted Cruz leads the GOP race, while for the Democrats, Hillary Clinton narrowly gets ahead of Bernie Sanders. We start at the nation's top office. President Park Geun-hye once again urged passage of a series of pending bills to complete her reform drive, nurture new growth engines, and revive the economy. Our Song Ji-sun has our top story.
At the fifth cabinet meeting of the year, President Park Geun-hye highlighted the importance of the bills pending at the National Assembly, underscoring their role in boosting the economy and improving people's livelihoods. Dozens of bills aimed at revving up the service sector, fostering small and mid-sized companies, and implementing reforms remain pending at the National Assembly, some for years, due to a political standoff between the two main rival parties.
각 정당에서 추구하는 가치가 무엇인지, 어떻게 경제를 살릴 것인지 명확한 해답이 없이 비판을 위한 비판은 결코 국민 경제에 도움이 되지를 않습니다. 국민 경제가 더 나아지고 국민의 삶을 윤택하게 할 대안이 있다면 언제든지 받아들일 준비가 되어 있습니다.
She also made note of Seoul's strategy of growth reform. She pointed to the fact it has been rated as the second best among the G20 members, but said the reason it missed the top spot was because several of the related bills are still stuck in the parliament. She also emphasized the need for deregulation, saying that excessive regulations stand as obstacles to new growth engines, and that it's important to act quickly in this fast-paced era of development. Pointing to a recent security scare at Incheon International Airport, the president also called for full readiness in the emergency and security sectors ahead of the upcoming Lunar New Year holiday, or Seollal, which starts this weekend. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now, regarding those pending bills, the National Assembly Speaker seems poised to break the stalemate between the ruling and main opposition parties that has kept Parliament at a standstill for weeks. But with the end of the current session and the start of a major holiday right around the corner, it doesn't have much time. Kim Young-gil tells us more.
Assembly Speaker Chung Yu-ah has been insisting for weeks that he would not use the authority of his position to bring bills up for a vote. But on Tuesday, he changed his mind.
I will definitely call a plenary session this week. It will either be on the 4th or the 5th. I will use my authority as Speaker to bring the one-shot bill up for a vote, and it will be passed.
The bill is aimed at helping companies that undergo restructuring via deregulation and tax breaks. Chung said he's willing to introduce this particular bill because lawmakers had reached a compromise on it last month. They had been planning to vote on it last Friday, but a last-minute disagreement raised by the opposition over the country's electoral map delayed the plan. The ruling Saenuri Party criticized the opposition for breaking their agreement.
The Minju Party suddenly reneged on our agreement to vote on the corporate revitalization bill last week. This is a disgrace and a breach of the negotiating rules. The party is more focused on the election than on people's livelihoods.
The Minju Party wants the constituency bill passed with the one-shot bill.
I urge passage of the redistricting bill first, and then we can vote on other pending bills. This is not a matter of what comes first. It's the Parliament's obligation. The ruling party should not criticize us as though we're not concerned about people's livelihoods.
The old electoral map expired at the end of last year, and with the parliamentary election in April fast approaching, the issue has taken on greater urgency. The main point of disagreement is over the number of proportional representatives. The Minju Party says it is inappropriate for Chung to introduce the one-shot bill himself when it believes a compromise can be reached between the rival parties. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
The newly minted minor opposition People's Party held an inauguration ceremony this afternoon in the city of Daejeon, with the potential to be the third biggest contending party to represent in the April general election. They are vowing a shift from the country's established two-party system. For more, we have our Shin Se-min on the line at the National Assembly. Se-min, give us the details about the party launch.
Good evening, Daniel. The People's Party signaled an official launch to the new political party. At the inauguration ceremony, the tycoon-turned-politician An Cheol-soo and independent lawmaker Chun Jung-bae announced they will be sharing leadership of the new party.
We're on a journey to reform politics and taking a path that hasn't been attempted. We'll fight against a two-party duopoly, and I'll stake all that I have on the election.
As you just heard, co-chair An Cheol-soo promised to raise the party as the country's third biggest political party in the upcoming parliamentary election. But still, even with the official launch, the outlook for the new party is still unclear. For one, the People's Party has just 71 days to prepare for the elections, considered not much time. It could also be faced with challenges in terms of resonating with the voters and forming a solid support base. Currently, the party only has 17 incumbent lawmakers, just shy of 3 seats of the majority needed for the party to form its own negotiation group within the parliament. And a recent survey by local pollster Real Meter confirms that a rough ride may be ahead for the People's Party, as the approval rating fell to 13%, down from 20 2 weeks ago. So we'll have to see how the new party uses the time it has to take shape and gain as much momentum as it can leading up to the election. Daniel?
Well, thanks for that, Se-min. Lots to expect and possibly more developments before the April elections. One thing about An Cheol-soo, he does seem to enjoy taking on challenges head-on. That was our Shin Se-min reporting from the National Assembly. Moving on to other stories, the Russian ambassador to South Korea expressed his doubts about a proposal for 5-party nuclear talks, as well as the deployment of the THAAD system on the Korean peninsula, saying it won't change matters or promote safety in the region. Our Kwon So-ah reports.
Russian ambassador to South Korea Alexander Timonin says experience shows that the 6-party talks on denuclearizing North Korea are the most effective way to deal with the North's nuclear ambitions. He was responding to a question about whether Russia is still against President Park Geun-hye's proposal for 6-party talks without Pyongyang after Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov dismissed the idea last week.
We have a high regard for President Park Geun-hye's approach to matters related to Eurasia and Northeast Asia. But with regard to the North Korean nuclear issue, we don't see much efficacy in holding 5-party talks. We still believe that dialogue is the best method of engagement and that 5-party talks would isolate North Korea.
China is on the same page as Russia, while the other 3 6-party talks members, South Korea, the US, and Japan, support the 5-party talks idea. Japan is the latest to get on board, with Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida voicing his support during a phone call on Monday with his South Korean counterpart Yoon Byung-se.
Minister Kishida offered a positive assessment of our proposal for 5-party talks within the 6-party talks framework.
In his remarks to reporters in Seoul on Tuesday, the Russian ambassador also expressed concern about a deployment of the U.S. Army's Terminal High-Altitude Area Defense System on the Korean peninsula. Seoul had previously denied it was considering deployment of the missile defense system, but recently softened its stance with the latest threats coming out of Pyongyang, including the potential for a long-range ballistic missile launch following the state's 4th nuclear test last month.
The placement of the THAAD system won't change things in Northeast Asia, nor will it make the region any safer or help resolve the nuclear issue.
The diplomat also asked that all the concerned parties refrain from any actions that could escalate military tensions, a reflection of Russia's more lenient approach to North Korea. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
South Korea has launched a new task force to handle North Korea's nuclear weapons program and promote peace on the peninsula. Seoul's Unification Ministry formed the 5-member team with former Unification Ministry spokesperson Kim Il-do taking the lead. They will be tasked with exploring policy options aimed at denuclearizing the North, easing military tensions, and coordinating with government agencies to support communication with Pyongyang in the case of inter-Korean talks. The government decided to establish the task force in the wake of the North's fourth nuclear test last month. Acting strongly and swiftly, the World Health Organization has declared the Zika virus a global public health emergency. The WHO says the most important protective measures are the control of mosquitoes and the prevention of mosquito bites, especially in pregnant women. For details, we turn to Kim Mo-kyun.
The World Health Organization has declared the mosquito-borne Zika virus a public health emergency of international concern. The announcement came after an emergency meeting in Geneva on Monday, made up of 12 health experts from the United States, Europe, and Asia.
I am now declaring that the recent cluster of microcephaly and other neurological abnormalities reported in Latin America, following a similar cluster of French Polynesia in 2014, constitutes a public health emergency of international concern.
WHO officials say the emergency has been called over the cluster of serious brain defects in unborn babies thought to be caused by the virus. Brazil's health minister says local researchers think Zika is the cause of the roughly 3,700 confirmed and suspected microcephaly cases in Brazil, but the link has not yet been scientifically proven. He added that the virus cannot be transmitted from person to person, but only through mosquitoes. Since there is no known vaccine or cure yet, authorities say the only way to avoid contamination is to avoid getting bitten by the Aedes mosquitoes that transmit the infection. With the WHO predicting up to 4 million infections by the end of the year, traveling and trading activities to infected countries could be restricted, but that hasn't happened yet. With the 2016 Rio Olympics just 6 months away, panic is spreading, particularly among female athletes, spectators, and journalists. The Brazilian government has advised pregnant women to stay away from Rio until the outbreak is brought under control. The Russian and Australian teams have also told female athletes to consider carefully if they want to take part in the Games. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
Korea's consumer price growth went back into the 0% range last month, but there seems to be a pretty big discrepancy when it comes to how people feel about prices and the actual numbers. Hwang Ji-hye tells us why.
I'm in downtown Seoul, one of the most bustling districts in the capital city with no shortage of restaurants. The store rent in this area shot up over 30% in the third quarter last year from a year ago, pushing up costs not only for restaurant owners, but also their customers. So it's no surprise that demand for dining out has remained sluggish on top of a loss of appetite due to the country's feeble recovery momentum. Because of higher rental fees coupled with pricier labor and ingredients, prices on restaurant menus went up over 2% last year. This growth is in stark contrast with the overall inflation rate that stood at below 1%, explaining why people feel prices are running so high when the actual figures are low.
It feels like prices have risen in general, especially food products.
A radish cost about $50 the day before yesterday, and today, when I went to the supermarket, it was around $1.50. A bundle of green onions was nearly $4.
Regardless of how people feel about these costs, overall inflation continues to sit low. Statistics Korea said Tuesday prices edged up a mere 0.8% last month from a year ago.
Prices in the service and agricultural sectors have risen around 2.4%, but petroleum products and gas prices affected by plunging global oil prices drove down overall inflation.
So while the prices of products linked with oil have dragged down price growth in general, goods and services closely intertwined with people's daily lives climbed significantly more. Experts also say the math in consumer price growth could be done differently.
Generally, when calculating the inflation rate, greater weight is given to product groups that consumers spend more money on, so it's price-based. That means the figure could be more reflective of the consumption pattern of those with high incomes.
With that, some point out there should be a separate price growth figure for low and high income earners to provide a more well-rounded view. 황지혜, Arirang News.
South Korea has jumped 2 notches to 27th on this year's Index of Economic Freedom. Park Ji-won explains why that's not a bad ranking at all.
The U.S.-based Heritage Foundation, in partnership with the Wall Street Journal, has announced the results of its annual Index of Economic Freedom. Hong Kong topped this year's list, followed by Singapore and New Zealand. South Korea ranked 27th, making it the 7th highest Asian country on the list. South Korea scored well in terms of regulatory efficiency, particularly business and monetary freedom, but got relatively low marks on labor freedom and freedom from corruption. On the overall list, the United States was 11th, Japan 22nd, and China 144th. North Korea remained rooted to the bottom. The index measures the economic freedom of 186 countries based on a variety of subcategories, including trade freedom, business freedom, investment freedom, and property rights. 8 countries, including Syria and Somalia, were not graded due to their overall failure in state affairs. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Over in the United States, the race to be the next president of the country kicked off with the Iowa caucuses on Monday night. On the Republican side, Texas Senator Ted Cruz upset the field and rode a wave of evangelical support to victory over billionaire property mogul Donald Trump. On the Democratic side, with one precinct still left to report in, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is holding on to a razor-thin lead over Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley came in third and ended his campaign. A good showing in Iowa is vital to a candidate's momentum because it's the first state to vote in the months-long nominating contest. Historically, no candidate that has finished worse than third in Iowa has ever gone on to win the presidency. The candidates now move on to their next battle, a primary on Tuesday in the state of New Hampshire. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. As always, thank you for watching.